I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. I'm excited about today's show. First time we've had two CEOs on the show at the same time. So a lot of pressure on me. I'm a little bit nervous. Today we've got Wendy Greenland. She's the CEO of Openforce. It's a technology-driven services firm that reduces the operating costs and the compliance risk for companies using independent contractors. And it seems like everybody these days is an independent contractor. So we'll have to get into that. Mark Warnquist, my other guest, he's the CEO of InShare. It's an insurance company that's dedicated to the sharing economy. The team is filled with alums from Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, other, sharing firms, the independent contractors. So you can see why the two of them together make a lot of sense on this show. Wendy and Mark, thanks for joining me. But Wendy, I'll start with you. Openforce, technology-driven services firm. What's an example of a customer that needs your technology? What are the issues that they're trying to solve, and why do they hire you?
So we work with companies that work with independent contract workforces. So independent contractors, we call them ICs. They're contracted for a specific project or time period. They're responsible for their own tools and training, and they do the work, and then they're evaluated based on the result of the work and meeting the terms of a contract. They get to negotiate their own rates. They don't have benefits beyond the financial compensation for that position. And the work that they're doing, and they work independently, and they can work for multiple companies. They love the flexibility. They're their own business. They're their own boss. They're entrepreneurs in their own right.
And then
So we work with companies who work with them.
And then Mark, obviously, I understand insurance for the gig economy, the sharing economy. I get that, I think, just from a basic point of view, but it seems like insurance, anyone can get it, right? Anyone can go get their insurance, whether they're a contractor or an employee. So what's the real problem? What's the problem that you're solving? Was there a problem before you came into this?
So there's a couple different problems. One is you want insurance that's what we call episodic in nature, when you're actually working for the gig, when you're on app, so to speak. And most coverage, or frankly, all coverage, other than that coverage, is 24/7, right? So you don't want to be paying for coverage when you don't need it. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is that people that work for these app companies, independent contractors, are typically very digitally savvy, and they're just a different customer set with different needs. And the third thing is that these independent workers that are working for these platform companies, the platforms are constrained in how they can provide insurance coverage and benefits to them without facing risk. So I'm sure we'll talk about that. And that's one of the reasons we partnered with Openforce.
I was going to say, how did you all meet? Because you're both in Arizona, I think, right? There's some Arizona connection. There's an industry connection. Who came to who first? Was this that, hey, we're neighbors in Arizona, and it turns out we're both doing sharing economy things? Or did you reach out from a corporate need basis and then realize that you're basically neighbors? What's the story here?
Well, I could start by saying we were at the Truckload Carriers Association, the TCA conference.
It sounds like a fun
March.
conference. The
Truckload
Carriers Association.
And we were meeting with insurers about the technology that we provide, and we ran into somebody that now has been moved over to Mark's team, a new underwriter for them, made some introductions, and then he introduced me to Mark, and the rest was history.
Yeah, from my perspective, we had that first conference, our first meeting. I met Wendy and her team, I forget where, somewhere in Phoenix, and we just saw the world the same way. We're all passionate about meeting the needs and serving the needs of independent workers. We believe it's good for business, and it's just every time we talk, we find a new way to work together. It's very cool.
The idea of a contractor versus an employee, we see a lot of legal hassle around, a lot of debate around it. Like, what's the definition? Is it up to opinion? Is it everyone can decide for themselves? Oh, I'm a contractor or an employee. Wendy, maybe, ask you this question, like, who is a contractor? How is it defined? Who gets to decide? Does the company decide, hey, you're the worker, you're going to be a contractor or an employee? Does the person, me as the worker, get to decide? Who's making that decision?
Well, that's a very complicated question, because
we only have a couple of minutes. We don't have all day for that.
There are numerous federal, state, and local agencies that have their own multi-factor test to determine whether somebody should be classified as an employee or an independent contractor. There's the ABC test, the economic realities test. You've got the DOL, the NLRB, you've got the IRS. So many different agencies, state and federal, that will say this is our classification test, and here's how we determine classification status. I think simply, if you go to the ABC test, which is the three-prong test, it's the hardest to pass, but it may kind of simplify this for us. The ABC test determines that an independent contractor is free from direction and control from the contracting company that they're working with. The worker performs work outside of the usual course of business from the independent contractor. So they're out delivering, and the contracting company does something different in their business day to day in the way they're structured. And then the worker is customarily engaged in an independent established business or trade occupation. They have their own tools of the trade and those kinds of things. So that's probably the simplest form to determine whether somebody is an independent contractor. That's called the ABC test. That's the test right now in the state of California that's been on the news with the codification of something called AB5. So that's probably the easiest way to define it. Obviously, a W-2 is hired with the assumption of an ongoing relationship, and they're provided all of those things. And so there is an established kind of direction and control, whereas with an independent contractor, there cannot be.
It's complex. The fact that you said that different government, whether it's federal, state, local, different agencies have different definitions, that seems scary to me, that there's not one definition. So it could be, oh, this organization thinks that you're a contractor, this other one thinks that you're not. That may certainly cause a lot of problems and get some legal fees, start getting those hours built up.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And
so I'm a lawyer and I can speak to the legal fees, but it's a particularly gray area. It's the regulators and the courts who, in the end, get to decide. And and it's not black and white. And you may be an independent contractor in one state and may be deemed an employee in another state just based on the differences in state law. So it is rather complex, and
right.
It also, because it's complex, it also creates risk for these companies, and that risk is very real.
And I was going to say that creates an opportunity for both of your firms then, right? Because where there's risk or uncertainty or different definitions and compliance regulatory burden, that there needs to be someone who can help solve that, an expert. Like, okay, good. Now we know that Mark's a lawyer and an insurance expert and the CEO of a technology company that can handle this. Wendy's had her long career there too. So you're both experts, and these companies, I'm sure, are confused because their job is not to be experts on the nuances of their law. Their job is like, hey, we deliver these packages. We're logistics, we're transportation. We don't know what we're going to get something wrong even when we're trying our best here.
Right. That's absolutely true. And I think what it comes down to is, can you prove what you say you're doing in this relationship? And so we have a lot of contracting companies out there that are working with independent contractor workforces, and they believe they're following all the rules. They think they've got their model set up properly. They're working with independent contractors. They're trying to follow all the rules for the state that they're in according to the federal laws as well. And what it comes down to, oftentimes, if there is a case or a work claim or an audit, can they prove that the relationship they established is really the way that relationship was actually playing out? And so the interactions day to day, the way they're actually receiving deliveries, the way the ops managers are working with those delivery drivers on a daily basis, how they're communicating with them, it all comes down to really, can you prove this relationship is as you say it is as you're trying to set it up? And that, I believe, is really where technology comes into play, because that relationship needs to be established. It needs to create evidence along the way, so you can say, here's how we set this up. We were both engaged. We both understood the relationship. And here's now the evidence and the proof of that relationship through the technology that we're
Is
using.
the contractor typically just a one-person driver, or is the contractor themselves a big company, right? When I think of these trucking companies on the road, like they are themselves hiring employees to be full-time drivers for them, but the company itself may be the contractor to who they're delivering for, as an example. Am I getting that right? Because obviously if you're Uber or Lyft or even Airbnb, my guess is it's typically just an individual, right? Like they're not companies themselves.
Yeah, you've touched on another layer of complexity when it comes to courier and last mile owner operators. You end up with, as you go more and more in depth into the larger and larger vehicles within transportation, you end up with subcontractors and then helpers, because when you're delivering a refrigerator, you're going to need some help, right? So you end up with two-man teams. You end up with a master, what we call a master contractor, and then a subcontractor. And so now start adding and layering on the complexities around compliance and insurance. How do we make sure that all of those subcontractors or helpers are insured properly, that they have the proper compliance, the background check, the drug screen, the motor vehicle record is clean, all of those pieces. And that's why technology really is the only way to start creating that evidence, so that all of these players all the way downstream are not only compliant and they meet the terms of the contract with maybe a retailer, but also that they have the insurances that they need to be on the road doing that work every day.
So then, Mark, when you're providing insurance to, let's just call it, I'm gonna say Uber driver, for example, is it you're doing it through Uber, the company, or you're doing it directly through the driver? Who's the one buying the insurance? And if it is the driver, it seems like, do we really want like hundreds of thousands of different drivers making these individual decisions, or should Uber, the company, just say, here's your insurance. We'll take it out of your fee. You just take a few bucks out of this. We're going to do this for you and make it simple. What's the right goal here?
So the way it's done today, 99.9% of the time, is that the platform company, the Ubers, the Lyfts, the DoorDashes, et cetera, they buy the insurance protection for the benefit of the driver, and then the driver pays for that through a remittance that they pay to the platform company. That is an efficient way of doing business in that space, as opposed to having millions of drivers by individual coverage. So that's typically the way it's done. If I may add, just Eric, because I was one of these platform companies, I was in the inside of the belly of the beast, so to speak. I can tell you that these companies very much want to do the right thing for independent workers, but because of the risks that we're talking about, the risks of classification, of having somebody claim or allege or bring a lawsuit claiming that the drivers are actually employees versus independent workers, there are limitations on what they are able or willing to do to provide benefits for these independent contractors. Because the moment they do, somebody could argue that they're exercising control or they've failed some portion of the ABC test. So that's what Wendy and I are trying to do, is try to do the right thing for independent workers in a way, leveraging Openforce, that removes that risk from the platform companies. That's what it's all about.
What is the size of this overall market that the both of you are trying to get to? Is it measured in, I assume it's some number in billions, right? It's not millions, it's not trillions, it's some number in billions. But what is the size? Maybe you two look at it differently because you have different business models here. But what's the addressable market that you each are looking at?
Wendy, let me take it first, if that's okay.
So yeah, go right ahead.
If you take the most conservative estimate of the number of independent workers in the United States, the most reliable conservative estimate is 59 million. And there are estimates where it's almost double that. But right. I would, even if you take the most conservative estimate of that, this is if you put everything in it, it's a $20 billion target market or more. That 20 billion is pretty conservative. That's on the insurance side. That's only the insurance side of that.
Just the insurance. Oh, geez. And the whole thing is much bigger than that.
It's a $600 billion market if you count everything.
Yeah. Before COVID, it was a $300 billion market. And after COVID, everything began to accelerate. So they're anticipating those numbers doubling, which would make Mark right, almost 600 billion. I also am looking at 59 million as the conservative number, which is what, 36% of the workforce. It's over a third now. And they're anticipating that it's going to, over the next 5 years, grow exponentially again. What we're seeing with this new generation of workers coming out is that they want flexibility, they want to own their own business, they want higher earning potential, they want multiple income streams. They like this gig work where they can do a little bit here and there. And that creates a lot of challenges for the insurers and for the retailers and for all of those that want to make sure that they're on the road compliantly and with the proper insurances. And so that's really what we're doing together. Our two companies, Mark and Openforce, is we're trying to create more usage-based insurances to where if you're out delivering on the weekends, you're not having to pay for an expensive commercial auto that then would be something that they don't necessarily need all the time, but just when they're delivering groceries on the weekend, or maybe picking up some Uber or Lyft rides on the weekend. Those are the kinds of challenges now. The barriers to entry, very high insurance costs, big down payments that they cannot afford. Those are the problems that we are together now beginning to try and solve.
There are some other problems, Eric, too, that we're trying to solve for the, and I tend to go to the platforms inside, but it is a war for drivers in the delivery space. Coming out of the pandemic, the Great Resignation, it's challenging to find drivers, and these platform companies appreciate that, know that, and are doing their best, trying to do their best to earn the right for drivers to stay with them. And we think that one of the things that can create stickiness with drivers is providing the basic protections that they need for themselves and their families. And if that's difficult to do on your own as a platform company, then there's an alternative to be able to do that, do the right thing for them, and do it in a way that reduces risk.
The business models, I think I'm right. FedEx uses contractors, but UPS uses unionized employees, right? You know, a normal consumer doesn't see the difference. It's just like the trucks are the trucks, they show up, but very different models on the inside. Does your data or anecdotes or whatever information you have, does it show that one model is better than the other? Like there's a reason to do it one way or the other?
You know, our data shows that 98%, I would say, of the independent contract workforces that we work with, and we're well over 300,000 strong in the Openforce platform over the last 21 years, we see that they want to be independent. And so I think the key here that we have to understand is that if they are choosing this, and this is better for their life and the way they want to run a small business, the way they want to make money, and the way they want to live their life, so they have some flexibility in their schedule and so forth, that we need to provide them a way to do that successfully. And unfortunately, what we found is that because of all the complexities and all of these state, federal, and local agencies getting involved, that we sometimes lose sight of the fact that these drivers just want help. They just want to know how to do it right. And so that's really where we believe as a company at Openforce that that's our responsibility, because we have the ability to say, in order to pick up this contract, you need to have these insurances and these compliance items. If you don't know how to do that, we will help you, because we can without the risk of direction and control, because we're not issuing the routes. We're not issuing the guidance on where they're going to deliver, how they're going to deliver. That's going to be coming from somebody else. We're effectively separating direction and control, and then we can work with those independent contractors on the things that they need in order to be successful and do this successfully. Number one of which is they need some help financially, cash advance. They need help understanding the 1099 model, tax help. They need benefits like medical, dental, vision. These are all things that a contracting company such as Uber or Lyft, or any of the third-party logistics companies, courier, last mile, owner operators, any of the companies that work with them, if they start trying to provide those things or being creative about that, that puts them at risk. And so by us stepping in, separating the direction and control, then we're working with them on the benefits that they need, the cash advance, the other things that they need in order to be successful on the job. So it's a path to help them to get to that entrepreneurship that they're looking for. Now, that being said, they can choose, right? If they're choosing that lifestyle, they need some help. That's where we come in. But there's also a lot of employee models out there that they can also choose if they prefer to have that stability. The earning potential isn't as high, but it gives them a little bit more stability. So for us at Openforce, it's all about empowering that choice. If that's the choice they want to make, we want to figure out a way through technology to provide the evidence that it is the relationship that they need so they can do it successfully.
Can I ask a really dumb question? Because I can understand, okay, if UPS uses employees and they exert control and direction, these are the packages that need to be delivered today. And we know you work here every day because you're a full-time employee. But if there's a contractor, I think if maybe the Uber models in my head, like I'll just turn this on when I want to work or not. But if I'm FedEx, like, well, I need to make sure that these packages get delivered when I said they're going to get delivered. If everyone decides they don't feel like working today, how's this going to work? How does the company manage the logistics process with a bunch of contractors who just all say, well, I'm not available today? How does that work?
So it's a great question. You asked the question, what model works better, right? So if you look at it from the person side, it's a question of whether you prefer the independence or the additional security, if you want to call it that, at the expense of independence of being employed. If you look at it from the other side, what works best and how do you do it? Well, if you're an employment model, you do have the control. If you have the independent contractor model, you better do the right thing to attract independent contractors to your platform, because the only way you're going to make money is from the drivers that are driving for you, for example, in the delivery space, right? So the answer, Eric, is you need scale and you need to be able to attract drivers or independent contractors to your platform. If you can't do that, you're going to run into the problems you have. And you saw some of those issues with rideshare, right, in the pandemic, when there just weren't enough drivers.
Right.
And that's we're starting to come out of that now, thankfully. But that was, if they were employed, it probably would have been 1/3 of the number of drivers, but they would have been driving full time.
Is the government making this all harder? Because Wendy went into this whole thing about, okay, you need to do your benefits, your 1099s, your taxes. Because I know contractors, they don't get taxes withheld, right? So at least as an employee, we get our taxes withheld. So I don't spend money I never really had, but you get a full payment of $1,000, and really you only should have had 700 of it. And if you spend 1,000, you're going to be in trouble with the IRS at the end of the year. So does the government set this up in a poor way? That the fact that you both exist, is it because the government has failed contractors with the complexity that is too complex for a normal person who just wants to be an entrepreneur? It's like, there's no way that I can possibly comply on my own without having to pay someone to help me.
Wendy, if I'll just take one couple sentence statement and then I'll hand it to you on that. I think there are plenty of opportunities for the government to simplify this process, do the right thing, have a third classification somewhere between independent contractor and an employee where you're allowed to have benefits. I mean, there are many things that government can do to make this easier. I don't know that we exist because of the complexity, but the complexity is a major contributor to what we offer.
Yeah, I would say that we do work outside of the United States, and we find that this is not a complex issue in other countries. That they understand that people want to be gig and they want to be able to have this flexibility and different kind of earning potential. And here, what we've done is by state, we have given the state, I mean, the states have the right to make their own laws regarding this. And so you're seeing different states are adjudicating this differently. And then we have the federal government with all of their different agencies also coming in and saying, here's how we want to classify. That's why it's become so complex. I think Mark's right. If we had a simpler model, we can certainly create technology to create the evidence of the model. But it's because it's many agencies federally, many agencies within each state, that it starts to become so incredibly nuanced and difficult to manage. And for numerous reasons, there are lots of reasons that every one of these agencies do it the way they do it. But yeah, we have made this quite complex. And ultimately, at the end of the day, as I said before, there's a population of people that want to work freelance. They want to be able to be contingent and have more flexibility. So we want to provide them the means to do that and become an entrepreneur, business owner in their own right, if that's what they would like to do. This is a wonderful opportunity to create small business owners in America if we can find a way nationally and at the state level to help them to be successful.
When I think about trucking, I think about some of the recent developments in technology. There's going to be self-driving trucks, big AI fleets going down the highway, doing all this, long distance delivery on these open roads. When the two of you see these developments, see this news, do you think this is a good thing? Do your eyebrows raise up like, oh my gosh, we're going to have some real major issues here because God forbid there's a crash? What does that mean for the insurance? How does this system work? What are your thoughts on the direction of some of the latest and greatest in the tech side of this?
So I'll take it first, if that's okay, Wen.
Go ahead, Mark. Yep.
I'm excited by the future, but I need us. I'm hopeful, and I see that we are doing it systematically, slowly, cautiously. There was a time when I thought we were rushing towards autonomy faster than we should, and we didn't have all, if I may say, our ducks in a row. So I'm excited about that future. I know it will change things, but everything changes, right? So it's, will the insurance need to change there? Sure. Is it already underway? Yes, it is. And we're a part of that as well. So to me, it's exciting. I like that kind of innovation and change, and it creates opportunities. The world's going to look different, but there'll be plenty of opportunities in that different world.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. I'm excited about the future. I mean, not just automation that's coming. So we're a technology company, so we love new technology and new innovative ways to think about solving some of these problems. The distribution supply chain is something that can benefit greatly from new innovative ways to get goods from here to there, and everyone wants something delivered to their home these days. That's certainly something that was accelerated through the pandemic. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and not just from a technology and automation standpoint, but from a sustainability standpoint, I think there's a lot of opportunity as well. We're seeing electric vehicles. We're seeing a lot of new innovative ways for drivers to think about these things. But you also then add the layer of complexity around direction and control. You can't tell an independent contract business owner that you have to be sustainable and you have to have automation. They're a small business, and so now how do we work with them to understand their part in this? And from an Openforce standpoint, we just see that there's a ton of opportunity for us moving forward to create technology and innovative ways to solve these problems. So I look very much forward to where we're going.
I'm curious for each of you. I'll start with Mark and then I'll ask Wendy, same thing. In your specialty in this field, when you talk to a normal person, just a friend, a relative, just someone out and about in Arizona, and you explain what you're doing, what's the most typical myth or misconception or a question they ask you because they don't understand how it works, but they just see it from the outside, right? So someone who's never been in the industry, but they think they know it because they're just sitting at home watching cars and trucks going up and down the road. What's the first question that you get asked? I was just like, I can't believe people don't realize this.
So I think the biggest question I get is, why do they need insurance at all? Don't they have insurance? Isn't there their auto insurance covering them, for example? And the answer, of course, is no, unless you've purchased appropriate endorsements and other such things. So I think there's a misconception of insurance and how it works in this world. And the second conception, or second surprise, I guess, is the question that you asked. The folks are surprised to learn that it's the Ubers, the Lyfts, and the platforms that typically are buying the coverage, and then through the remittance to the drivers are paying for it. So those are the two of the biggest surprises that I come across almost every day.
Yeah, at least I knew that much. I think everyone should know that, right? Anyone listening, your normal auto insurance does not cover you for commercial use of the auto. So everyone should just realize that before they start picking up people and taking some money from them. And then, I'll get Wendy the same question. This from the trucking point of view or the bigger transportation point of view, when you talk to people, and because most people have never driven a truck in their life, they've never delivered anything in their life, they're only the recipients of it. So what do they come to you with a question where you're just like, I can't believe people don't know this?
Well, so first of all, I would have used Mark's answer, because insurance is almost always the question that I get. Once in a while, I'll get, well, how come I don't have, these groceries on my store shelf, or how come my deliveries used to be to my home quicker, sooner, faster, and now it's taking more time. So I think this supply chain disruption, I do get quite often right now, but that's probably secondary to the things going on in insurance. I think the nuclear verdicts that we're hearing about are surprising people. I get a lot of questions about that. And what I mean by that is when a jury, provides a judgment that is enormous in the millions and billions of dollars now for something that happened. And they're trying to understand how that could happen, how the insurance companies are involved, and what happened, and why those judgments are getting so big. So I get a lot of those kinds of questions as well. And I think it comes back to exactly what Mark said, which is, what are the proper insurances that people need to have? Do they have the right compliance? Do we have the right people on the road that should be driving and delivering these goods? Do we have the right insurances for people who are going into the home? Are the people who are helping deliver a refrigerator, for example, are they all insured, and are they all, do they have clean background checks? Those are the kinds of things that I end up usually getting into when we start talking about some of these very nuanced situations that you sometimes see in the news.
I'm glad you mentioned the nuclear verdicts. I think most people don't realize that you go back 40 years ago, a verdict from a jury that was over $1 million was very rare, right? For any kind of, let's call it injury or liability. And now $1 million is nothing, right? We're seeing billions of dollars, hundreds of millions, and there's just humongous numbers that a generation ago didn't exist. And I don't think people realize, in a way, in a little bit, it comes out of all of our pockets, right? Insurance rates have to go up to pay for that, right? We all pay, right? Whether it's car insurance, whatever it is. So I think it's a good reminder that you mentioned the nuclear verdicts. It's not related to whatever's going on in Russia and Ukraine, or, this is just very high intensity, high severity numbers on these awards, and a little bit we all pay for it. Before we go, this has been fascinating and fantastic, by the way. How does somebody reach your companies? Who do they get in touch with if they want to learn more? If they are saying, I need this, like, oh my gosh, I guess I've botched this, I need to talk to Wendy or Mark. What's the right way? I'll start with you, Mark. How do they reach you or InShare? Who's the person that they would need to get in touch with?
So they can always go to InShare.com, to our website, and they can always reach me at mark@InShare.com. And I'll make sure that you find the right person to help you with whatever you need.
And then Wendy, who should they reach out to, and who do you want to be hearing from? I'll add that too. Who are you expecting that these are the people I better be hearing from, because they're the ones that need the help?
So first and foremost, you can reach us anytime at Openforce.com. So you can get onto our website, take a look at who we are, what we do, the different verticals that we service. And we, on Openforce.com, we service both independent contractors who are looking for work. There's a link on there where you can fill out a form, and you'll end up then being available to any of our contracting companies for work that may be available in your area. And then also any company that is working with an independent contract workforce that would like help separating direction and control, sales at Openforce.com. My email is wendy.greenland@Openforce.com. And we'd be happy to walk through some of the things that we talked about today, in the ways Openforce and InShare are working together to solve some of these problems.
No, this has been super educational for me, certainly for anybody listening. I think we forget how many people, how many different sectors, industries, organizations it takes to move things and move people and move goods all around the country, and in your case, when you're around the world, there's so much that I think the normal person doesn't realize that's going on behind the scenes. And in order for entrepreneurs and contractors to get this right is so important, because we need this whole thing as part of our ecosystem. Like we saw during the pandemic, if the supply chain doesn't work, we all suffer. So we want everyone to get this right and get this organized in a nice way. Wendy and Mark, thank you so much. I'm glad we did this, right? We had 3 people in the podcast at the same time. We had 2 guests at the same time. Nothing seemed to have broken. So that's pretty good. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.